In conventional meditation, how we usually always start, all of us, the aim is to calm down the mind, to rest the incessant thought activity so that we can access those gaps of silence between the thoughts, so that there can be some sort of non-dual understanding, an understanding or a recognition of what we truly are beyond this individual perspective, right? So in conventional meditation, there is an individual perspective, an individual doer that is doing something in order to reach a non-dual perspective, an understanding. One tries to train their mind to become quiet for temporary periods of time by focusing on an object. Meaning, if I tell you to focus on your breath is an object of your perception. By focusing on the breath and letting go of the thoughts, by focusing on the breath, eventually you start to experience the gaps in between the thoughts more and more. Or by focusing on the sound of some music, by focusing on the feeling of your body, the outline of your body. So it's by training the attention to focus on an object, to train the attention to be one-pointed, so that the mind comes down to a little calmer place, so that there can be a recognition of what exists when thought no longer exists. So see, the thing is though, in conventional meditation, there is an individual doer doing something separate outside of itself, focusing on something outside of itself to reach the oneness perspective, the oneness understanding. So the practice itself is imposing that dualistic perspective. Okay? The reason we do conventional meditation to calm down the mind, right? Why is it necessary to calm the mind down? Because it is in the cessation of thought activity that you can come to an understanding of what you truly are beyond it. Thought is quite literally what creates duality. Okay? Because with thought, there needs to be a thinker. A thinker that is thinking about something that there is to be thought about. So there's instant separation. And in conventional meditation, we seek to train our mind to become quiet so that there can be a cessation of thought activity, so that in the deepest of meditations, like you lose sense of a thinker, of a doer, of an individual me, and that which you're focusing on, and there's just silence, right? So that is what we are able to achieve for short periods of time. But you see how it's coming from this self-imposed dual perspective. So conventional meditation, although effective, especially in the beginning, it ultimately becomes a barrier eventually, because you're in meditation, you are always bringing the perspective of this individual separate self doing something, training the mind in order to experience something. And so also people who really get attached to this sort of meditation, they become very experience oriented. We start to chase experiences. Like, I want that experience of nothingness. I want that experience of blankness. Whereas the true aim of meditation is not to seek an experience, but instead to recognize the one that is experiencing the experience. So no matter how blissful the experience you're experiencing, let it go. That is not the aim. Seek instead the one to whom this experience is occurring. And so that is when we get to self-inquiry. In self-inquiry, we are no longer seeking to train the mind to become quiet for short periods of time so that there can be this understanding, but rather we are inquiring directly the source, the perceiver of the thought that is occurring. So no longer we're trying to make the thoughts come down and be quiet for short periods of time. We're directly inquiring, right? To whom do these thoughts occur? I know this thought, right? What is this me which is aware of this thought, that knows this thought? And directly in that inquiry, and by the way, this inquiry is not mental. This question is not to be answered with a concept. As soon as you inquire, what is this me? The I which perceives this thought, which knows this thought. If you directly go to your experience of me, of I, what happens is that the thought activity automatically comes to a halt. Because attention is no longer outward focused. In conventional meditation, we are training the attention to become one-pointed, right? To be focused on something for a prolonged period of time. However, in self-inquiry, the moment we truly inquire or investigate, who is the one? What is it within me that is this sense of me which is aware of this thought? Instantly, attention is no longer going outward, but is now inward. It subsides back into its source. The mind itself subsides back into its source. And there is just the cessation of not only the thought activity, but also the thinker, the individual separate self perspective, which we previously, in meditation, we were using that perspective to achieve some result. So self-inquiry is no longer about coming to an experience. It is actually inquiring the nature of the experiencer itself. And that is why it's considered the most direct path to recognition of what one truly is. In it, attention is no longer pointed to any object of perception. Any object, meaning no thought, no emotion, no circumstance, nothing. But instead, one is more interested in, what is this me that I know as me, right? Like that I sense as me. The body and mind are itself perceived to change within my awareness. So what is this sense of me that perceives even the body and mind change? And the moment we inquire, thought is already dissolved. It subsides back into its source. By truly investigating in this way, again and again, attention learns to stay more and more in its source, rather than constantly being focused on objects. As I said, the more attention is outward, focused on objects also including thoughts, there will constantly be the sense of an individual I that is focused on something outside of itself. So the perspective of me and the world are quite literally born simultaneously, only because there is this sense me, an individual inner me. With it comes the sense of an external world, things outside of me which I can focus on. With self-inquiry, we're looking to come to the true perspective. What is aware of even this me which is perceiving the outside world, the supposed outside world? And this understanding by itself seems to dawn once attention learns to subside back into its source again and again and again. The mind is no longer being trained to become quiet for short periods of time, but rather is itself dissolving back into its source from which it arose. And therefore, self-inquiry is the most direct, deepest meditation, which ceases, eliminates the thinker and that which is being thought about. The individual I, which is perceiving all objects. By practicing, you come to a truer understanding of yourself, life. And only through that can you go about relating with life as it is, authentically. And only then can there be true happiness here and now, and effortlessness throughout this journey.